You all happy that I'm recording?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just start again with the cardiovascular health. So that's the focus at the moment because it's much higher risk for men than it is for women. And there are some risk factors associated with it that are now coming out. So, for example, if you start menopause early, if you have erratic periods during your fertile period, if you start your periods early, those are all increased risk factors for cardiovascular problems from midlife and beyond. They have discovered that whereas hormone replacement therapy, estrogen, that is, can be a challenge for certain women, and some of those women are women who've had treatment for cancer, older women, and everything else in menopause. If you take HRT in early menopause, it can have a protective effect. It has to be taken at the early stages of menopause and for no longer than 10 years for this to be the case. If it's taken over 60, that's not very helpful. And if it's taken more than 10 years after the start of menopause, and I do mean the start of menopause, not the day of menopause, so the start of perimenopause, it's also not very helpful. So early perimenopause is a good time to take HRT. This is a big data survey that they've done looking at a whole range of different research projects, and that's where they've come out with. But it's not a magic pill, and it has to be given in that period of time. Otherwise, outside of that, it tends to be less protective. But by far the biggest thing that we can do to protect ourselves is lifestyle. But one of the other issues that comes around with cardiovascular, by the way, by cardiovascular, I'm not just talking about risk of heart attack or congestive heart failure. I'm talking about things like risk of stroke, risk of coronary artery disease. There's a whole range of different things, and those risk factors are much higher in women than they are in men. But one of the key things is things to do with your heart. So angina and heart attack and all of those different things present differently in women than men too. And so what this research also showed was that it takes the chances of a woman receiving the right arterial support if she's if her arteries are clogged and it's reducing supply of blood to their heart, and they're in what do we call it, Catherine? I can't remember the right term for it. Not heart attack, but what is it? No, I can't hear you. Is it myocardial infarction? I can't remember what it is. However, if they're in that, they're much less likely to receive the treatment they need within the 2-hour window than men are. So there is some real issues around the attitude to female health. Yes, Catherine?
Yeah, I think that, as you said, it's probably due to the fact that women present very differently than the males. They don't generally have that thunderclap, pressure on the chest. It can be like more generalized discomfort and be confused with other symptoms, which is possibly why if they don't actually take themselves and get a proper enzyme check and also an ECG, then it's likely to be missed.
The interesting thing is that actually, even when they're in hospital and they've sought the right advice in hospital, they're still less likely to get the right treatment. This is why there needs to be a major change. But this is the reason why it's the big push this year for World Menopause Health, because this is not just a UK problem. This is a worldwide problem. So this is where there's been a huge amount of research starting now and a huge amount of effort. But this lifestyle impact is a significant part of this. So lifestyle is important, and that's where we come to when we move on to really what I was talking about, which is my next slide, which is the 6 steps to a positive menopause mindset. Now, these are based very much on research. And the being you comes about because of that very first step. But because I've just been talking about cardiovascular risk, I'm going to talk about this physical one first, because these are the lifestyle changes that we can make. So there's a recommendation that we get at least 150 minutes of exercise a week, cardiovascular exercise a week. because that will help us at least 150. That's like the minimum. So that includes, going out for a walk. It could include doing some gardening, some strenuous gardening. It could be cleaning the house, or it could be going to exercise classes. But we do need to have at least 150 minutes of exercise every single week. One of the other things that's out there is that there's a massive risk link between how much sleep we get and our cardiovascular risk. And this increases during menopause because, of course, in menopause, we often find our sleep is disturbed with the vasomotor symptoms such as night sweats and things like that. And actually, we find it more difficult to stay asleep. So sleep hygiene is key in terms of that whole idea of making sure we have a routine. So what I'm really curious about with this is where you are in terms of the amount of exercise you get, the amount of times you're out in nature, because that releases well-being hormones, the sleep that you get, and also the diet that we eat, because there is a massive link between what we eat and our heart health. Particularly this idea that a plate has a quarter protein, a quarter carbohydrate, and half a plate of vegetables. So I'm curious for all of you, how many of you turn to food when stressed?
I do the opposite.
You do the opposite?
Yeah, I don't eat when I'm stressed.
That's interesting, because I'm the exact opposite of that. I eat when I'm stressed. Tracy, what about yourself?
Chocolate, all the carbs. I head straight for all the nasty stuff when I get stressed.
Yeah. And me too. I tend to go, and interestingly as well, if I've got a migraine, I tend to want buttered toast. I want carbs again, and I actually want weak milky tea, and I don't drink milk in tea, so that's a really strange one unless it's too strong for me.
No, if I have a migraine, I can't even bear the smell of food.
It's interesting, isn't it? We're all different, aren't we? But that stress response and food, which some of us have, is also a really big issue in terms of the fact that we tend to go for the foods, the carbs that we shouldn't be going for in such large amounts because of those sugar peaks and troughs that we get. So how many of you wake up in the middle of the night?
Me.
To sleep? Yeah.
Me.
Sometimes
I do, but to go to the loo, so I don't. I think that's slightly different.
Well, that also impacts, doesn't it? But often this waking up in the middle of the night can be because we've got a sugar trough come in. So depending on the kinds of foods that we're eating, if we're not eating that balanced plate, then what we find, and because as we hit menopause, perimenopause, we can't manage our sugar levels as well. So we're far more sensitive to sugar highs and sugar lows. And we find ourselves going through extremes of really high level of sugar, and then our system kicks in and it gets rid of all of that sugar, and then we feel hungry again. And what can happen is in the middle of the night, if we've eaten sort of high levels of carbs in the evening, is overnight that drops right down to a really low and says, I need you to wake up. It's the stress, it releases cortisol, which wakes you up. Because when you're on these sugar cycles, you have this cortisol in place. So that in itself, what causes us to wake up, that's one of them. Night sweats can as well. And what we eat really, really affects, our chances of getting all of these different menopause symptoms. And the other one is stress. So if we're eating and creating stress in our body through eating too much carbohydrate and simple carbohydrates, not complex carbohydrates and sugars, we're bringing out more stress. The more stress we have, the more fat layers we put on. The more fat layers we put on, the more our risk of cardiovascular disease goes up, the more our chances of high blood pressure go on. So there's this whole risk, because the change in estrogen levels in our body make us more likely to have high blood pressure as well. I don't know I hit high blood pressure during pregnancy and then high blood pressure as I hit perimenopause. So I've got one of those cardiovascular risk factors due to being female.
Yeah.
I don't know about others.
I think it's also tied into diabetes as well.
It is.
Insulin resistance, which is hand in hand with increased cardiovascular risk.
And it's to do with the fact that estrogen is a protective hormone that helps balance those things in our body. And it goes back in balance post-menopause, but we've often got ourselves in quite a pickle in that process. And, like it ties into the way the brain works as well. And being out in nature is interesting, because being out in nature, releasing those hormones, those oxytocin hormones, actually allows the estrogen that we do make to come back into play. So it means that we get a better level, reduces stress levels, more estrogen being released by the adipose fat and the other areas in our body other than our ovaries, which aren't producing it. And we start to feel better, and we reduce our menopause symptoms. So it's really funny how all of these things really interconnect. And as I say, the cardiovascular health risk. What sort of exercise do people do?
I go out with my dog every day. I'm out for an hour every morning with my dog, and that's at weekends as well. And if I go on holiday, I know I haven't done it. I feel completely different.
Yeah, does make a difference, doesn't it? Catherine,
Yeah.
what about you?
At the moment, it's just swimming primarily.
Serena?
I'm just a lazy cow.
Except for the fact that you were allowing Mark to chase around today, were you?
Well, yeah, but I take the dog out, but it's not for an hour. It's only a little dog.
Yeah, but to be fair, I said 150 minutes a week. So that's less than an hour a day.
I do about half an hour a day walking the dog.
Yeah.
But no, I don't do anything else really. Although I've got one of them Fitbit things, and when I was doing the ironing, it thought I was swimming the other day. So I think that must be.
But you are using some muscles then, because one of the things that I was going to say is, as well as cardiovascular fitness, one of the things that's really important for our bone health is resistance training. So whether that's going to the gym and lifting weights, or whether that's doing something that's physical.
Up on a Wednesday, and
well, exactly. That's weightlifting, and the older she gets, the more weight that is to lift.
Exactly.
I think sometimes
I don't do anything that I should do.
I'm not sure.
I think sometimes we
go on. Sorry.
I was just saying. I think sometimes we forget just doing some housework, just putting the Hoover around is exercise.
It is.
Yeah.
Then that is a bit of resistance training. If you go up the stairs with your Hoover, we forget.
I live in a bungalow, but
I was just going to say you don't have stairs.
Stop talking yourself down. Half an hour a day. That's what, 3.5 hours a week.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. Yeah.
Exactly. And after you pick your dog up, sometimes you pick Coraline up, you pick other things up. Ironing is an exercise, because you're picking the iron up and you're using some pressure. So these things are all exercise, and this is the key thing. I'm not saying you have to run a marathon every week. I'm saying you have to do a little bit of exercise, and just be mindful that what you're doing is exercise. But try and build up some making sure that it's not just the walking and the cardiovascular, but that we're doing things that will build our bone strength. Yeah. Walking does that because it's developing muscles in the legs, but it's the upper body as well that we need to think about. So scrambling probably does both. Trying to get through mud certainly does your leg muscles. Those things are really quite important. So that whole thing around physical, it's the physical activity is a whole range of different things. Being out in nature. I mean, we've all talked about, well, 3 of us have talked about dog walks, because everybody knows I go on dog walks as well, and I love it. But being out in nature, just staring at the sea and those amazing waves, how calming was that, Catherine?
It was exhilarating, actually. It really. You could feel the energy of the sea. It was just,
Well, that time when you were laughing at Rob and I was fascinated by the fact that the shale was running away from the sea as well, because it was jumping up and running away. It was bizarre. You can hear it. You can hear the popping of the shale as the sea's coming on. But what I realised was it's actually literally ahead of the wave. It's popping up and running backwards away from the wave. It's quite incredible. As Rob and I were trying to stop ourselves getting drowned by the wave as well, because we were a bit too close to that big wave. There's no evidence, though, Catherine, so it didn't happen.
I do miss that. When I was in Hopton, I used to go up every day, and we used to walk along the seafront. And actually, the windier, the better, really. I like it when it's windy. And I miss that being here. And no, I'm not going to drive to Felixstowe.
Lots of people do with their dogs.
Your granddaughter loves Felix Stowe.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not doing that. No, once a week maybe, but I'm not doing that on a daily basis.
No, but it is good. I mean, we go a couple of times a week and it is good. And today was amazing. But it does release really good hormones and you feel much more settled. So that, that's really helpful. I'm going to go down a step now and go to that authentic self. How many of you dress because you think, put clothes on because you think that's what the clothes you're wearing or other people might want you to wear, or do things because you think that's what other people might think you want to do? All of those things. How many of the things that you're doing in your everyday life and the decisions you're making in your everyday life are actually about trying to fit in as opposed to trying to be you?
99%.
Yeah. And this is the thing, isn't it? And women are particularly prone to this. What about the other two? What about yourselves?
I don't think I do, actually. As you can see, I'm sat here in a towel in dry robe coming back from swimming, and I don't actually go out to work to the office, so generally it's casual wear. And I think I used to be concerned about what people thought of me, but now I don't tend to worry about it.
See, I'm not convinced that that's 100% true, Catherine, because in certain circumstances, you won't do things.
Well, if I was going out socially, then I would want to fit in more. But in my day-to-day life, I don't really care. I mean, if I stand around the prom in a swimming suit and I don't care, then...
How about if you were standing around Bury St Edmunds in a swimsuit?
Well, I think I might get arrested, to be honest.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether circumstances make a difference and how comfortable you feel being yourself.
Possibly.
Yeah. What about you, Tracy?
Unfortunately, I've been a people pleaser all my life. It's beginning to change very, very slowly. I'm working on it. I'm really working on it quite hard at the moment. But generally, my childhood meant that I was going to be a people pleaser for my life, and it's really hard to change it once you've got it.
Yeah, it is. And I can definitely relate to making decisions about what I'm wearing, thinking about what other people might think, and making decisions about what I'm doing based on what I think other people might think. But I think the advantage for me, being that little bit older than everybody else on here, is that I'm quite considerably through the menopause now and post-menopause, and I've noticed that I care less, which is quite good. I'm much more comfortable being me now.
I think a lot of it, I think some of it is because I'm still at work. I can't, you can't go with jeans and a jumper and whatever. No. But I think mine's is also how I look. Do I look fat in this? Do I look, like that? So I tend to think too much about what other people are thinking about what I look like in something, rather than thinking I just feel comfortable in this, I'm going to wear it.
Well, this is it, and I can relate to that completely. This whole idea of this exposes me as being fat or what have you. I do worry about sometimes. And then I look at photographs and think, oh God, that's terrible. But
yeah, no, I do.
Yeah, and that is about other people's perception, isn't it? That you should look something different, or it's my perception of other people's perception of things. What I've learned through the swimming community is that we're all different and it doesn't matter. And I think the swimming community has helped a lot with that, to be honest.
Well, when you first started, there's no way you would have walked along the prom in just a swimming suit.
Yeah, and I've actually walked all the way to the other end, to the River Deben, in just a swimsuit. So
there you go.
Or rather the other way back, because I couldn't put my shorts on because I was wet. But yes, I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? But that whole idea of how many of us feel comfortable being who we are. I know, some of you have said to me, you just want to feel like you're being you again. You just want to be you again. And that's a very common feeling.
For me, part of it when I became unwell, and I don't know how much was mental health and how much was menopause, I felt that I lost part of myself. But I think that was perhaps partly to do with being off sick for so long. But yeah, I don't know how much tied into the menopause. It's quite difficult to sort of tease it apart.
It's really common to feel like you've lost yourself when you get to this age. When you get into perimenopause and menopause, it's really, really common to not quite know who you are, or that you've lost yourself, or to know how you're redefining yourself. And it's also really common to want to find more to life than what you found yourself in, because estrogen is our caring hormone. It makes us want to nurture others and spend more time on others than it does on ourselves. And as that reduces, we start realizing that we've got ourselves in the picture as well. And we want to spend more time looking after ourselves. But it is so common for us to say, I don't know who I am anymore, and I'd really like to find me again. I don't know if that resonates with others.
I found it was more the fact that I thought I was actually losing my mind, because I wasn't remembering things. I was thinking, what's the matter with me? I was getting so angry with members of my family, and I'm known for my patience.
Yeah.
It was like a complete, but it made me lose my confidence. I lost my confidence completely in who I was. And at the time I was a nan, I was a mum, and I couldn't understand what I really thought I was losing my mind until I saw something on the menopause, and I thought, oh, hang on, this this actually makes sense now.
This is it, isn't it? And I did too, and I can recognize that anger that Tracy's talking about, because I was known as being really calm and really centered, and apart from when I was a teenager, when I had a really, really quite big temper, but which I calmed. And when I found myself really struggling, and again, was it mental health? Was it burnout? Was it the combination of different things? And I think menopause triggered the burnout. Was that I would get combative, wouldn't I, Catherine?
Just a little bit. But for me, it was more frustration. It was really the frustration of not being able to do things the same way that I used to be able to do them. I used to remember everything. I used to be able to multitask. And I think it's just developing coping strategies and saying, actually, it's okay not to be able to do all of those things. And that was
absolutely
quite hard.
But it's also recognizing that the brain recovers. Like I've said before, during menopause, the brain kind of does what it does during teenage years, which is why I've referred to menopause as the second teenagehood. Because what the brain does during teenage years is basically scrub all its wiring and then rewire itself, as a simpler way of putting it. And during menopause, the brain is doing exactly the same. It's purging connections and then reconnecting. And there's evidence that post-menopause, women's brains are still developing and getting better. They recover to their pre-menopause level and add some, whereas men's have already started declining. Ours actually goes up. So we're adding white cells when men aren't at this stage. So I think that's pretty impressive from our point of view. But I think managing that time when you feel like you might have Alzheimer's, are you going into dementia? What's going on? But we're so bad at managing this through humor. I mean, we used to have this standing joke at work about, we opened the door and the door took our mind away from us. As we, get up, go to the office to ask for something, get to the office and go, what the hell did I come in here for? I've got no idea. And I was like you, Catherine. I held everything in my head, and I could bring things, and it felt a little bit like Alzheimer's in the sense that I could remember what happened a year ago, but I hadn't the foggiest what happened 10 minutes ago. And that's terrifying, isn't it?
But I know that a couple of years ago, I was having to actually write down what I'd done at work, because otherwise I think to myself, hang on a minute, have I done that or not? So it was sort of coming up with strategies to deal with that. And I think that did help. But I'm looking forward to getting some more brain cells. That would be good.
Oh, absolutely. It's always good when they come back, isn't it? It's always good if they arrive. I think the other thing, though, is that this, going back to this authentic self idea, it's really important that we do allow ourselves to be who we are, and that we accept ourselves for who we are, and we go, yep, I'm fine with that. But sometimes we don't know who we are, and that links to other elements of what this is talking about. But going back to those symptoms we were talking about as well, in terms of brain fog and things like that, stress stress is one of the biggest challenges for that, because stress messes with the estrogen releasing in our bodies, which actually stops the brain working, because the brain is disconnecting, and estrogen is kind of one of the hormones that leaches into the brain and helps the brain find its homeostasis, that level where it needs to be. And by being stressed, we stop that happening, and our brain doesn't know how to cope. And so we get more memory loss. So the more stressed we are, the more memory loss we get. And the more symptoms we get of menopause, the more stressed we are. So it's being able to find a way of releasing the feel-good hormones, which is the physical step, really makes a difference to that. And one of the other ways of managing the stress and the mental health issues that arise is connection. Now, I was thinking about connection in a deep way recently, because I went away, for the weekend with university friends. And it was just so wonderful how we walked into the room, and it was like the 40 years since we started knowing each other, because we started university 40 years ago, weren't there. We could reconnect with ease. And I could connect with Tracy, who I'd only ever met online, over coffee in the cafe. It was an amazing weekend. And also conversations I've had with other people around feeling like those connections aren't there. And I've really started valuing my friendships. Catherine in particular, you've been one of my stalwart friends, getting me through some pretty difficult times. And connection is powerful. Connection is so powerful. We are a social animal, and we need connection. So it's really important what we do to invest in our connections. So I'm curious what we all do to invest in the connections that we have with ourselves, rather than the connections we have with others. I'm curious what we do to connect with ourselves.
Do you mean things like meditation and still time, and is that what you're talking about? Is that the sort of thing you mean?
To some degree, yes, but also that sort of really sort of just understanding that we are who we are, and giving to ourselves. So that bit about always defining ourselves by giving to others. How much do we give to ourselves? How much do we practice gratitude, for example, or and look at things and go, what an amazing thing that was, or recognize the moments of joy, the glimmers in our days, rather than just focusing on the negatives. How much do we go, I'm okay, going back to it's okay to be you, and I'm connected to me. I know who I am. I know who I am in this moment. I know where I am in this moment. Because giving to others, I think a lot of us do, and do quite well. But how much do we give to ourselves?
I think it's quite hard to give to yourself, and I'm always telling myself that I need to be kind to myself. So even when things aren't going well, to remember that it's okay that they're not going well. But it is quite hard. But one of the things I've recently started doing again is getting my nails done, because that does really make me happy. So, but also I probably could be better at things like practicing gratitudes and things like that, which have slipped off the radar a bit while I've been back at work and with
I've always been terrible at connecting with people in terms of investing in friendships. I've always been terrible at getting back to people and responding to text messages and things like that. When I was working, and when I was kind of really struggling with managing my time, all of those things disappeared. I didn't connect with others so much. Then the swimming came along, and that really helped. But prior to me doing the outdoor swimming, I don't think I really connected with people that much outside of work. It was kind of work and then slob in front of the telly, and that was all it was. And I think this is why that connecting with myself through connecting with others has been really important for me. And I've realized just how much it's important to invest in those relationships, not just expect in those relationships. And that can be a challenge.
I think it's quite easy to almost isolate yourself from other people, because you're struggling to get through what you need to do with work. And if you're not working quite at the same potential because of brain fog or whatever, sometimes you don't always feel like being social after that.
No,
So
just too exhausted.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not much of a social animal anyway. I mean, people are a bit annoying. I prefer being, no, I'm only joking. But, I don't like
Gee,
groups. I've never
thanks.
liked groups, large groups. And that, so that just didn't help in that. But one of the other things that can help us with connection is volunteering. And actually volunteering helps us feel good as well, because that is that giving to others, and giving to others does really help. And some of the giving to others can just be recognizing in others positive things, saying to somebody, that what you just said then just made me feel really good, or just even thank you for opening the door, or thank you for stopping in your car to let me pass. Bizarrely, all of those things really help us in terms of connection. So they don't have to be things that are mutually responded to. They can just be acknowledgements. And I think that's quite important. But I'm going to move up a step, because I'm curious about your curiosity. I'm wondering how much you've looked at yourself, or you've looked at menopause and thought, I wonder what's going on.
Well, I've done quite a lot on reading on the menopause and what I'm going through compared to what other people are going through, because weirdly I kind of think it just happens to me.
We all do. That's one of the
person.
reasons for this group. Yeah.
Sorry?
It's one of the reasons for this group, because we all feel alone.
Yeah. I think that's the problem though, isn't it? I mean, because you don't want to sit there and go on and on and on about, how you're feeling to somebody else, really. And so you end up just telling yourself how you're feeling, and that just makes everything kind of like major, and then no one else could possibly be going through it as badly as me. Which,
no, I definitely felt like that, and I think Catherine would probably relate to that, because I think I told Catherine that as well.
I think that the thing that because I've had some serious mental health issues as well, because of life events, and I think going through that and realizing that other people with mental health conditions, a lot of the symptoms are quite similar, and a lot of them actually overlap with menopause as well. So I think you'd find, if you actually spoke to someone who was at the similar age and said, oh, I'm really frustrated with X and Y, do you get these symptoms? I think you'd probably find that a lot of people do have similar experiences. So yeah, you aren't alone.
No, and I think that's it. So that's one of the reasons, that was one of my motivations for creating this Facebook group and creating it as a free Facebook group, because what's really important is that we don't realize, we realize we're not alone, and that there is somebody out there who's suffering similar things to us. We're all different, so we all suffer it differently, but we feel it, we can empathize with each other. But also doing what you were doing, Serena, and exploring is really good for your brain, and it's really good for your mindset around menopause, because you realize that what you're experiencing is similar to other things that are out there. I think there's something like 94 different symptoms people can talk about when they've got menopause, when they're going through menopause, most of which are not treated as if they were menopause. So they've kind of really medicalized menopause and treated the individual symptoms, as opposed to seeing the bigger picture and understanding where that's coming from, and being holistic in the approach, which is one of the challenges certainly in UK medicine, is we're not very holistic, because other than GPs, everybody is ultra specialized in one area and doesn't really look at the bigger picture. The aching bones can be the hormone chaser, all of these different things that we all experience, getting out of bed and going, oh, hang on a minute, how can I stand up? Or the stiff feet is what I used to get, really bad stiff feet getting out of bed. And so I was sort of struggling to walk to start with. These are all things that are actually quite common in the menopause, and again, made much worse if you're under stress. But we can often be under stress because we're stressed about how we're feeling in the menopause, and because we don't know it's the menopause, it makes us more stressed. Vicious cycle. But being curious is really good for the brain because it develops the brain and it actually releases the right sort of hormones again and settles the brain. So it reduces the cortisol levels and increases the feel-good hormones and helps the brain develop. So it does make us feel a lot better. I mean, I don't know, Tracy, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've had at least 2 instances of women a similar age to me who I've come across at work, and they've gone, "Oh, I'm so frustrated today." And I've gone, "Oh, have you got some other symptoms going on?" And I've listed them, and they've gone, "Yeah." And I've gone, "I think you might be perimenopause. Go and talk to the specialist GP at the doctors and just say, I think I might be going through the menopause, because if you do it now, don't leave it to you losing your mind. Go and talk to somebody now." And then there's another lady I work with as well. We both actually joke, if we forget to do something, "Oh, it's the menopause, don't worry about it." And it's out there, it's open. Before, I wouldn't have said anything to anybody, but it's nice to have the knowledge, so if I come across somebody else, I can say, "Actually, I can help you with this because I'm going through XYZ. You might be suffering with this."
I mean, that's good, isn't it? But I think the problem we've got as women as well is we kind of feel like we just need to motor on. So even if we're acknowledging with others that, it's menopause, I'm thinking about my environment where it was mostly females and, the office staff and myself, we were all of a similar age. But we kind of sort of did joke about it. I'm just being a menopausal, but it was almost like I need to man up. And I'm using that phrase quite deliberately. I need to be able to work through this. And actually, it doesn't work like that. And that's when we we give ourselves that high risk factor of burnout and everything else, because actually we're still trying to please others. We're still trying to do what we think we should do. And we're not really exploring it.
Jane, I think there's a huge culture here of just get on with it. Stop complaining. Get on with it. And we need to address that. We need to say, no, actually, I'm not all right. I need some time.
Well, I mean, imagine if there was another sort of medical issue. I'm going to use medical issue for that reason, although I don't think menopause is medical. It just presents itself that way. That affected 53% of the world's population. There'd be a lot more known about it, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
But there isn't that much known about it still, which is such a shame. I'm going to ask a question. How many of you know what your personal values are? And have you ever thought about it? I know you've thought about it, Tracy, but you have an advantage because you're a coach. So you have an advantage. I'm wondering about both Catherine and Serena here, really. Have you ever really thought about what your values and your meaning is?
Jane, have you thought about asking an easy question?
Well, that's the reason it is a difficult question.
She's really always challenging.
There's I'm a teacher. Come on. The thing is that if we have a purpose, and this is so hard, it's really hard to identify a purpose. And I'm not saying we should all just sit there, write down, this is my purpose in life, these are my values, because you can't do that. It really doesn't work like that. And this is why that being you is there in my strap line, because this is part of really finding out who my authentic self is and being true to myself. It's about understanding what my values are, what matters to me. So, and often it's easy to find out what your values are by going, what annoys you in other people?
I think also as well, they do slightly change depending on what's going on.
Well, they do. These are all plastic things. They will change. They're malleable. They change with context. They change as you go through life. But I'm sure we could all say quite clearly, this behavior annoys me in people. This behavior annoys me with people. Behavior that annoys you is contrary to your values. And that's why it annoys you. So one of the ways of identifying your values are what really annoys me. That's okay. So the opposite of that is my value. So it really annoys me when people are rude and self-centered and focused on themselves and only themselves to the detriment of everybody else, and don't have any manners. That annoys me. So clearly,
being selfish and arrogant would be mine.
Yeah, it's that therefore means that the opposite of that. I believe that people should be polite, measured, considerate to other people and compassionate of other people, because people who aren't drive me nuts. And that's how I work out what my values are. you know, and I think that's a conversation that we can have. Purpose is really interesting because I think at this stage in life, in midlife, we start losing that purpose. You know, for lots of people, it's children have left home. Now what do I do? You know, or we start getting, instead of having children to look after, we start having our parents to look after, or we might have both. And we're still torn because it's like, where's me? Where's me in all of this? What am I doing? Is my purpose in life just to care for everybody else? And it can be a real challenge.
I wondered whether, because it all comes at the same time, is your children leave home and then you become you again. And I'm wondering if, like, in one way, you kind of want back the time before you had the children, but you can't do that. So, you know, I had my children a reasonable age, 25. So you think you have your children, they've left home, you've done what you're supposed to, they're gone out into the world. So where's my 25-year-old person? You know, where, you know, why have I got, I still don't have any time. I still, you know, you think, oh, when this happens, I'm going to have so much time for myself. I'll be able to do this. Won't have to worry about childcare. But
that's right. Yeah.
Don't get that back, do you? It's
no,
like...
and it's so frustrating, isn't it? And that's why I was talking about the fact we sometimes end up caring for parents when we've just lost caring for children. It's like, where am I in all of this? You know, where's the time for me? And I think this is where purpose comes in, because often as it says there, when life and purpose are aligned, actually, we feel much more settled. Our stress levels are lower. But we often don't know what that purpose is. So our life can't be aligned with it because we don't know what it is. And it's so much easier when, you know, I mean, Tracy, you must know this, that you're starting to get that life and purpose aligned. How is that feeling?
It's really great because I'm really actually becoming to life and knowing who I am, because 90% of the time I'm a sandwich generation, so I'm looking after 3 sets of parents, children, and then I've got 8 grandchildren, so my whole life is family. And it's really nice to actually find a job that is about me, and it's about me making connections and making more interactions with other people that aren't family, and that has really made me come alive. And it's the care in me, the need in me to look after people is really being nourished by making these new connections, being a coach. And I didn't have that before.
No. And you're finding a completely different version of self, aren't you? And feeling, you know, that's liberating, isn't it? But
Very
I would
much
say even when I first met you, that wasn't really the case, was it?
No,
definitely
definitely
not.
not.
For me, it's frustration, because although I connect with teams in work, because I work from home, I do still have barriers in trying to form connections with people in work. And although the company tries to do things to encourage us to engage with our colleagues, it's quite difficult, and that's the first thing that goes. Whereas if you were in an office, then you would talk to the person sort of making a cup of tea and whatever. So I think that's my difficulty to try and overcome somewhat.
You were having a similar conversation, weren't you, Serena?
Yeah, I think mine's is slightly different. I mean, I do work from home a couple of days a week, but I do go into the office a couple of days, and I don't have a problem making contact with people in work. That's not a problem. I just don't want to make contact with people in work. I want to. I mean, that's nice. They're nice people in that, but they're not my friends. They are work colleagues. And you know, I get on all right with them, but I don't want to go out with them, or, you know, for a night out or whatever. But I've got difficulties making friends, you know, people that I do want to spend time with and that want to spend time with me. I mean, I've moved around quite a lot, you know, in my life. I mean, I can't even remember where I went to school, let alone, you know, anything else. So I mean, if I sort of went back to 40 years ago when I was at school, I wouldn't know half the people there. I just wouldn't remember them. So I find it difficult to connect with people on a personal level. You know, I can do through work, but not, you know, sort of, as most people have friends, I suppose. I don't have that many.
And as I say, I think I was very much the same, Serena, until I started the open water swimming. I think the
Yeah,
I Can Run stuff
It's the same
started
for
it.
me as well.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the I Can Run started it, which is this hoodie, actually. This is I Can Run. That started it in getting involved in that. And I went to their beginner sessions, and at the end of the beginner sessions thought, I need to become a run leader, because that way it'll make me go out and do these things. And it really built a group of people that I could connect with, and some of whom I'm still connected with, partially because they also do the swimming, or rather they've migrated like me from running to swimming. But without that, I didn't have it. I didn't have it at all, because I'm like you. I didn't really want to connect and go out with my work colleagues. That was never my cup of tea. So, you know, and I needed the distance. They're nice enough people, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I found the friendship in later life, because I didn't start doing the run leading until 2016. So that's 6 years ago. So I was 52 when I started that process. And I think that's the thing, at 52, I started realizing I needed to connect more, because I'd done things like I was going to the gym on my own. That's different. I was doing the exercise, but I was going to the gym on my own, and it wasn't giving me that social connection. And finding things outside of work has been really important. It also helped me in my purpose. I found I enjoyed supporting others and encouraging others, and I found I was quite good at it outside of the work environment. So that was quite good too. And I think, but I was 52 when that happened, and I didn't find it immediately. It was kind of over that period of few years that's developed. And I think, that it's we have to put ourselves out there a little bit. And sometimes, I tell you what, I turned up to that very first session of the I Can Run, bearing in mind how transformative I've said it was, and told Emma, who organizes it, I don't know why I'm here. I hate running. I don't want to do this. It wasn't me that signed me up. It was my husband that signed me up, and I won't get to the end. So you can see how resistant I was.
A little bit negative, but
sounds like you.
I was so resistant, but it's been so transformative for me, and I think sometimes we find these things when we put ourselves outside our comfort zone.
Yeah,
and
I think for me, I had that connection in Canada, because I moved back from Canada because I was part of the guiding movement and I was a leader over there. But moving back here, I don't know what I'd have done if I hadn't have joined the open water swimming community, because I had friends, but our lives just weren't at the same sort of place.
Just
and
think, you wouldn't have met me.
I know. I wouldn't be doing stupid things, would I? But yeah, so I think for me, definitely, as Jane said, Serena, maybe put yourself out there and find something that you fancy having a go at, and just having a go. If you don't like it,
that's what I am actually looking at, to see if there's something. I ain't going swimming.
That's fine. You don't need to.
Well, no,
it doesn't need to be physical
either. So you're all right.
painting or
No, I have started doing painting.
a language.
That's a very you can't share a lot with that. And a few,
they do
because
classes and different things though, and they have clubs and
no,
different
but
things.
so this is what I was starting looking at. But a lot of the things are unfortunately seem
during
to
the
be
day.
Tuesday night or during the day, or
when you're not available.
Excuses. I have actually tried really hard to find something that's on a night or that I can do, because I don't get back from Great Yarmouth until about 7:30, 7:45. So by that time I just not be bothered doing anything anyway.
Maybe you look for something in Great Yarmouth before you come back.
It takes me an hour and a half to get back, and I know that wouldn't be good.
There's another idea that could possibly be a good thing, is for you to start your own sort of group where people come to you within the community at a time that suits you. So if you organise something from your home, you haven't got to go anywhere, but you've got people coming to meet you, even if it's a coffee evening, like other people like you that work during the day. You host something.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, no, that is a good idea. Yeah.
Or a wine tasting evening.
Yeah, like wine tasting, cheese tasting. I'm coming.
I don't drink. I'm quite boring. No, but when I've been talking to Jane, and it is something I was saying I want to put a bit of effort into doing. I haven't put a lot of effort into it before. I've started looking for what groups I can do. But no, I hadn't thought of actually doing my own group. That's quite a good idea. Thanks, Tracy.
That's
But
okay. So it's only just because there are other people probably in the same situation as you that can't get to groups because they're at work like you are. So your time would be when they were available, and you're more likely to have a lot more in common with them as well.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit daunting, isn't it? Starting your own group.
It
You
is.
don't need many, just a couple of people. It doesn't have to be loads.
It's like when I started all this up, it's like, will anybody actually want to come along? And I've got over 100 people now on the group, not many coming to the sessions, but there's 100 people there, which is quite nice.
I think people pick things up in their own time, though. Maybe they're not available. Yeah, I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it or not, but
no, and that's not the issue. That's why I record it, which is why when I forgot to record the start, I did start recording it because I want to put it up there. So let's go to the last one, which is about awareness. And this is that stuff that is around intentional self-care. So this is where I'm talking about mindfulness and really paying attention to what's going on in our heads. And I know I've spoken to quite a few of you about this idea of positive thoughts and negative thoughts, and following one of my clients, naming them angel and demon. That works for me as well. So I call them angel and demon thoughts. And that whole idea of how they affect our bodies and our moods. I mean, emotions last 90 seconds in terms of chemical signals in our bodies, but what our brain does with what it thinks that emotion means can make it last for days, weeks, months, years, forever. And it's a 90-second chemical signal. So it's about that being, when I say mindful practice, I don't mean meditation and I don't mean full-on mindfulness. I think it's just noticing what's going on. And it's very clearly noticing, not judging. And why is a really bad question to ask. Why am I thinking that is a bad question to ask? Because what that tends to do is reconfirm. It gives you positive, negative, it gives you positive bias on what you actually come up with. So it might be interesting to ask, what was I thinking? Or how did that thought make me feel? But certainly not, why am I thinking that? And really connecting what's going on in your head with the physical symptoms in your body. So that's that mindful practice. And the intentional action and self-care is doing certain things. It might be journaling. It might be deliberately listening to a piece of music. It might be meditation. It might be yoga. It might be any of those things, but taking an intentional action that is to create that ability within yourselves to have still body, still mind. Because that's self-care. And also all of those things that we talked about in terms of physical, those are either still mind, busy body, or busy body and busy mind. They're not necessarily this. And this awareness of self is really important, because awareness of what's going on helps us with purpose, helps us with insight, and helps us with connection and authentic self. It helps us with all of those things. Why do I always turn to toast or crisps when I'm stressed?
Because you're trying to numb the thoughts and feelings.
It's about noticing. And I've noticed I said the word why there. That's really a bad question. It would be, I noticed that I turned to those things. And then it's about changing the narrative that's in my brain. And I know a lot of you I've talked to about the fact we have these narratives in our heads and we have no idea they're there, but they predict, they take our actions for us. And we have to, first of all, we have to notice them in order to change them.
I think it's really acknowledging them and saying, I accept that I'm feeling X. Thank you very much for making me feel that way, but and then just move on.
Yeah, it's not non-judgmental awareness, most definitely non-judgmental. I've got my watch is going nuts with messages, and my phone keeps telling me it's time to ring my dad, but which means it must be a lot longer in this session than I thought it was going to be. So but I think that's really important that and it's at the top of the step, because it's quite difficult to do. You know, that's why purpose, insight, purpose, and awareness are right at the top. They are far harder for us to achieve than physical and connection. And I actually think we need to recognize that it's okay to be ourselves before we allow ourselves to take any of the other steps. So I've got them in that order for that reason. It's about permission. There's this massive permission piece that we need to do in order to be ourselves and then allow ourselves to take our flight up those stairs. You know, and we are terrible at giving ourselves permission for things because we use this language: I should, I must, I need. We use this all the time, or we use this language: when I, then I. And none of those are good. So I've now reached the end of the slide that I was talking through. Is there anything from anybody else that you would like to just talk about or bring up, or think this is what I'm feeling? I wonder if everybody else is. Because I did look at some research, and the interesting thing is that in a recent survey of women, health is the #1 concern. And all of the things that have come up in the group before, I better put my glasses on because I can't see it without that. Health, fulfillment with work, exhaustion from having to do it all, anxiety and depression, self-discovery are all in that top, the top 5, this group down here.
Yeah,
They're all of the ones.
Exhaustion is the one for me the whole time. And
So
because I'm exhausted, I find it difficult to motivate myself.
And the reason really for pulling that up is that we might all feel alone, but a lot of us are saying this.
Yeah.
You know, we're all feeling alone together, which is daft, isn't it? That's why we need that community, because we're all feeling alone together. But thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate that. And if that's all that we need to talk about, I think we've talked about quite a lot today, so that's been really good, and it's been a really good conversation. So thank you for engaging with me. I'm very grateful for that. Going back to step 2 and gratefulness, step 3 in connection, that gratefulness. Thank you for joining in. I think it's been helpful for me. I hope it's been helpful for you.
Yeah,
and
very. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Nice to see you all here. I will finish the recording and then end the session. So thank you very much.
Okay.
When I can find
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.